Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Today, my guest is Lauren Carson. Lauren is the executive director and founder of Black Girls Smile, a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting positive mental health education, resources, and support for Black girls' mental health. Mental health awareness is personal for Lauren. Thankfully, she survived 2 suicide attempts and is committed to providing mental health education and resources to help Black girls smile. Today, we'll be talking about social anxiety, school, suicide, and struggling in different areas of life. If you are a young Black girl, a Black woman, or Black mother raising a daughter, today's guest has some valuable insight to share. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. I'm super excited to have this conversation today.
Well, it's quite timely.
It is.
And so we'll just jump in because in a recent Times.com article, the headline stated suicide among Black girls is a mental health crisis hiding in plain sight. What do you have to say about that?
This is something that we have known for quite some time within the behavioral health space. The suicide rate has risen about 233% among Black youth in the last 10 years. And we were seeing a steady increase among young Black boys, but per usual, missing from the conversation with young Black women. So what we're finding during specifically this pandemic period is that suicide has actually decreased among every population except the Black community. And specifically looking at youth, it started to kind of stabilize for Black boys, but we're starting to still see an increase for Black girls. And clinicians, researchers have kind of been stumped at how to address these issues. But honestly, the first place to start is to have these sort of conversations to bring light to these issues, because a lot of our young Black women are struggling with their mental health and well-being, and people don't even know it.
Wow. There was a, statistic, a quote, Black youth are 2 times more likely to die by suicide compared to their white counterparts.
Yep. That's a staggering statistic that we've known for quite some time. And that's just one statistic. We're also less likely to access resources. So mental health resources, whether it's a therapist, seeing a primary care physician, a psychiatrist, any sort of mental health resources, we're less likely to access those. Additionally, there's a lot of secondary statistics. When we look at things like the prison to school pipeline, like those are things that inherently mental health and mental well-being is a part of that. Also conversations around adultification, looking at, the work of individuals like Monique, blinking on her last name. But the book Push Out, a lot of that has to do with young Black women and this conversation that we are consistently missing from when it comes to how school professionals, adults, mentors, teachers, coaches are interacting with young Black women, and how the adult relationships and interactions really impact the mental health and well-being of young Black women. This is just one aspect that makes us susceptible to mental health issues. We have a lot of risk factors that need to be addressed when it comes to Black girls' mental health that will start to decrease some of these statistics that we see pertaining to suicidal behavior.
It's interesting that you use the words we're missing from the conversation. Wow. Why do you think our Black youth, and particularly Black girls 13 to 19, have suicidal thoughts and attempts?
I think it's multifaceted. It's something that we've got to attack from multiple angles. But I would say one of the first reasons is how we treat our young Black women. Referencing again adultification, we look at young Black girls as adults. We treat them as adults when they are in fact still children, whether it's when it comes to discipline in the home or in school setting, even in interactions with law enforcement. We are constantly seeing the punishments, the language, the interaction being starkly different than their white counterparts. They are treated as adults. When we laugh, when we experience things like joy, people find offense with that. It's very hard for us to feel comfortable with our bodies, to feel comfortable in our interactions with our peers. These are all things that make us susceptible to mental health issues. And these these coupled with us having higher rates of violence, so that's trauma, racial trauma, sexual trauma, emotional trauma, us having to specifically in during this COVID period, young Black girls having to step up and take care of the household, having to go out and help, financially with their families, helping take care of family members, stepping into these very adult roles. In many instances, we don't allow our young Black women to be girls. We don't allow them to be youth, even though they are classified as youth. We don't allow that in our society for them to enjoy the aspects of being a youth, of being able to make mistakes, of being able to learn about your body, to grow in your interactions with individuals. These are not things that we are afforded as Black women and girls. And that definitely impacts our mental health and well-being, and thus leads to suicidal behavior, suicidal actions. And one of the statistics that's not even mentioned in this article is we have some of the highest rates of suicidal ideation. So even if we're not getting to the place where we're attempting or we're completing suicide, there's a large number of young Black girls who are thinking of taking their own life, who are at a place where they are not doing well with their mental health and well-being, and they're getting to a very hopeless and helpless place and don't have access to resources and don't know where to turn. Those are things that need to be addressed as well, because too often in the behavioral health community, we want to just focus on the fatalities. We just want to focus on the attempts. But when it comes to mental health, we also need to tackle these self-reported statistics that are feeding into some of these larger statistics that we see with suicide completion.
Wow. I bet so many parents don't even think about or consider a lot of what you said, because the need of the family, the day to day, they're just asking their daughters to step in.
Yeah. I mean, as a 33-year-old woman, I can definitely look back on my childhood very differently than I did at the time. But I think when we're talking about young Black girls, again, us not being allowed to be girls, that also happens in the way that we see a lot of people parent. They parent from a place of fear. We're not explaining to our young women that they can't, why we don't want them to wear a mini skirt, why we don't want them to wear a crop top. They feel like their bodies are being policed and they're not being allowed to express themselves in the same way that they're seeing their peers. Well, in all actuality, in a lot of instances, parents are afraid of how others are going to react to their young girls' bodies. Because again, they're seen as adults. But those are conversations that we need to have with our young people. I can, remember my mother like hiding my mini skirts in the dryer and things like that because she didn't want me to go out in public and show a little skin. And that wasn't something that I could understand at that age, but those also weren't conversations that were being had in the household, and are conversations that are very difficult for parents to have, but it's very necessary to start those conversations. So young Black girls understand what's happening and they feel supported and they feel like they can come to their parent, their aunt, their uncle, whomever who's in their life, and feel like they can talk to them about the things that they're experiencing, because this is just a silo. Once we start to open up that gate and create more spaces where young Black girls feel supported and they feel like they can talk to people about the things that they're experiencing, especially right now during this COVID period, that's going to create more spaces for what we call protective factors. So things that decrease our likelihood of suicidal behavior, of experiencing a mental health issue. And if you do experience a mental health issue, decreasing the severity and longevity of symptoms as well.
What are some of those protective, what was it called?
Protective factors.
Factors.
So the protective factors, you see things like having access to recreational activities. That is not something that we are always afforded within our community, and people don't always see those things as a privilege. But the more we have access to recreational activities, we have an outlet. We have a creative outlet. Having home security, economic security, those are things that are protective factors that we don't always have access to. Having access to insurance. And one of the biggest ones, which I always encourage parents, teachers, mentors, whomever, one of the biggest protective factors for young people is having at least one adult that they feel comfortable opening up to. Just one. There's so many young people that don't feel like they can talk to anyone, that don't feel like they can tell someone that they're anxious, or they may be experiencing some issues with depression, or they may be struggling in school or struggling with body image issues, or even things that we see quite often like cyberbullying. If young people don't feel like they can open up about those experiences, the more we hold those things in, those things start to manifest as mental health issues. And that's where we lead to places where you hear of someone struggling with a mental health issue for 10, 20, 30, 40 years because they don't feel like they have individuals within their life that can support them and help them work through those feelings and emotions and help connect them with the appropriate resources.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So Black Girls Smile has served over 1,850 Black women and girls in the first half of 2021. Thank you for that. Your nonprofit has a different approach. Can you talk to me about the services you provide and what makes your services different than some other organizations?
Yeah. I would say one of the first things that I hope anyone gets from our organization is that there are so many positives about mental health and mental well-being. When we have conversations, when we think about mental health, historically, it's been very negative. It's associated with mental illness, with negative stigma. But in all actuality, we all have mental health. We really work to normalize that conversation and help empower young Black women and girls to understand that you have a lot of resources internally, but also recognizing the external resources that you have to ensure that you stay mentally well. Identifying in your mental wellness tribe, who can you reach out to in your network who can be non-judgmental and can be supportive. That may not be your best friend. It may be your parent, but recognizing who those people are, recognizing resources in your community, national resources that you can access when you're experiencing mental health issues, and also starting to pick up on, and where we really focus as an organization, is the coping skills and self-care methods. Those are the things that refill your cup. Black women and girls, too often, we are pouring from an empty cup. We are giving to everybody else, and then we leave that little drip at the bottom of the cup for ourselves. That's not enough. If we continue to sustain that way, yes, we will thrive because inherently that's who we are as Black women and girls. But our mental health and our well-being and our success and our joy is definitely going to continue to take a hit. So accessing and tapping into coping skills. How do you cope with stress when your cousin is asking some ridiculous things to do? How do you cope with that? When your coworker is picking on you at work, how do you cope with that? When you are struggling academically in school, how do you cope with that? And too often people will find they think that they have no idea how to get out of difficult situations. All of us have done it before. And helping remind people of how they can tap into those innate resources to ensure that we cope in positive and healthy ways is key. And breaking down generational trauma, breaking down generational habits and coping skills that may not serve us anymore. There's ways for us to honor the things that our ancestors did to ensure that they got through each day. But we also can find ways to honor that and then say, hey, that doesn't serve me anymore. I need to find more positive and healthy coping skills. We don't need to continue to self-medicate and things like that. We can move towards yoga, mindfulness, meditation, drawing, dancing, singing. We are creative people. We're creative women and girls, and tapping into those things as coping skills is really key. And then the self-care. We got to refresh, renew, and recharge. That's so big for us as Black women and girls to, again, refill our cup. And those are the type of things that we focus on with Black Girl Smile. I know that was a long-winded answer.
No, but that was good. It was comprehensive. So you're not a therapist and you're not a mental health, I don't know, organization, but you're a advocate for positive mental health, would you say?
Yeah, I would say that we are very nicely placed in the early intervention and prevention space, which is a space that historically has been underserved as a whole when you talk about behavioral health and mental health. Too often the focus is on treatment and recovery. We want to get people treated for a specific mental health issue, and we want to get them to a place of recovery. But in all actuality, when it comes to Black folks, when it comes to marginalized communities, at times we're not diagnosed. Or if we do receive a diagnosis, are we receiving the correct diagnosis? Are our bodies even able to metabolize medications in the same way that, Black men or women who are a part of most research studies? And that's not to say that I personally or the organization doesn't recognize the therapeutic benefits of treatment, recovery, medication. I'm a person, I still have lived experience with clinical depression and anxiety. I take medication every day. But we have to move away from this one size fits all model because it's not working for specific demographic communities and specifically looking at Black women and girls. So we really focus on mental health literacy. We as Black folks, in many instances, have no idea what mental health is. We think that mental health is mental illness. You'll have people that'll say, oh, I don't have mental health. No, you have mental health. You may not have a mental illness. And even when someone does struggle with their mental health, they don't want to be labeled as crazy. They don't want their privacy violated. They don't want their employers to know. Like it's kind of this full spiral, and rightfully so in our community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. No problem. So let's kind of talk about the school setting. The Black community in general is struggling in several areas. So if parents are experiencing anger, depression, and anxiety, the kids are obviously also dealing with their own challenges. Can you speak about the transition back to school, social anxiety, and how the struggle is showing up in the lives of young Black girls specifically?
I would say a lot of anxiety issues. We're hearing a lot around anxiety with returning to school. A lot around academics and making sure that they can fulfill academic expectations, having missed a whole year of school. We also hear a lot around the social interactions as well, of what it's going to look like to interact with friends and peers. Again, everything's been online. We've all been on Zoom calls and FaceTime calls and every other type of call to connect with others. So seeing what that social interaction looks like in person, a lot of young people are really anxious about those type of relationships and renewing those type of interactions. Some of the things that we're really working with young Black girls around is making sure that you find an outlet to express your emotions and feelings. It is completely normal to experience some levels of anxiety. We all experience some levels of anxiety. And anxiety can be a good thing, actually. Anxiety helps keep us on our toes. Um, it helps us evaluate where our comfort zone is and where our uncomfort zones are. It helps us evaluate where we need to put in place boundaries. We're really starting to name, express emotions, and then start to plan. You know, it's very hard these days to start to plan and see what our interactions are going to look like. But having an idea of resources that you want to access, and that's again in your community, but also internal resources. If you find yourself getting anxious, one, what does that look like for you? Because the way anxiety looks for you is going to look very different. So starting to pick up on what are some of your unique warning signs and symptoms that you're struggling with your mental health. And again, you'll hear me say things like struggling with your mental health because we all do at times. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have a mental illness. But once you start to recognize what are your unique warning signs and symptoms, then you're also then able to recognize what are some of the unique ways that you can improve your mental health. Some of the things that you do may not be things that help me, and vice versa. So starting to recognize those things.
What are some of those things you found that people either you suggest or that young girls use to cope?
I would say journaling is one of the biggest. Finding different ways to journal. Journaling doesn't always have to be your hi dear diary. It can be drawing. It can be poems. It can be, writing raps. It can be storytelling. It can be whatever you want it to be. So journaling is definitely one of the ways that we encourage young Black women to start to name their emotions, give themselves space to feel the feels, as we say. Also starting to recognize, what did you like to do when you were younger? Did you like to dance? Did you like to listen to music? So we encourage, if you like to listen to music, which we hear a lot with our teens, come up with a playlist that you really like, a playlist that you know is going to bring you joy, is going to pump you up. Just like we have a playlist for, working out or something like that. You should have a happy playlist. So starting to think of those little things that you can implement to really, add a little bit back to your cup and to help you cope with stress, anxiety, or trauma is going to be key right now.
And it can kind of pull you out of a state.
Yep.
Yeah. You put that Black joy music on and you're like, was I anxious? Was I upset?
Exactly. And again, like recognizing what that looks like for you. I think too often in the behavioral health space, there's kind of these very technical terms like, agitation or making sure that your hygiene is good. We've got to start to normalize some of that terminology. If you find that it's difficult for you to get out of bed, if you find that you are short with people, if you find that your attention span is starting to wane, starting to come up with let's come up with a list of what warning signs and symptoms could look like. And then you got to start to recognize what that looks like for you personally.
And the work that you do, is this a group setting with a number of different young girls, or tell me a little bit more about the work setting that you...
Yeah, we've had to pivot quite a bit during this time. Previously, we would work with community centers and schools and come in and work with groups of young Black girls in small group settings. So it was normally between 8 and 12. Sometimes we did bigger group settings as well, but we always find that 8 to 12 range, it's really good for creating space for people to feel comfortable opening up and expressing their experiences and their stories. And we've tried to replicate that during this time as well. So creating small group workshops virtually. We've also taken several of our programs on demand as well, so that young Black women, caretakers, parents can learn more about mental health and well-being, but on their own time frame. Because everyone's schedules are kind of all over the place. So we're trying to offer different options. So we have in-person programming that we are starting back with school. see how that goes. And then we have our virtual programming where, again, it's normally small group settings between 8 and 12. And then we also have our on-demand programs as well on our website.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So how do symptoms present differently culturally for Black people?
One of the biggest is going to be psychosomatic symptoms. And this is big.
Which means?
Yes. This is big for Black women and girls. And essentially what psychosomatic means is we start to manifest mental health issues physically within our body. So you may see things like headaches, backaches, or muscle aches, muscle swelling, things like that. And we'll go to the doctor and we'll say, hey, I had some headaches, and we'll treat you for that. So they may not be asking, what's your home life like? What's your stress levels like? Are you under a lot of pressure? Black women and girls specifically are the biggest demographic to express psychosomatic symptoms. So starting to pay attention to what things you're feeling in your body physically when you're experiencing stress, when you're under a lot of pressure, or when you go through a traumatic experience, or you're triggered based on a past traumatic experience as well. We also see things among young Black women where too often we're considered angry, we're considered aggressive, we're considered loud. Those are things that, one, they need to get it right. Not loud. But also that could be a warning sign, a symptom of a mental health issue. I know I personally, one of my warning signs is I get really agitated very easily. I'm very short with people when I'm experiencing mental health issues. So looking for those things. Do you find that you're snapping? Are those things kind of playing out in your interactions with others? And then the last thing that's very big for us is how we feel about ourselves. So body image. Body image is consistently an issue among Black women and girls because of the way our bodies are seen by others, the way our bodies are talked about. And those are things that we start to internalize. So how you feel about your body, how you're treating your body, how you feel about yourself, how you're showing up for yourself, those are also warning signs and symptoms. So you hear things like strong Black woman syndrome or Cinderella syndrome, and those are specific terms related to mental health difficulties among Black women and girls. Because too often we're giving to everybody else and we're not taking care of ourselves. And we're thinking, oh, we're being so altruistic. This is what Black women do. We're supposed to take care of everyone else, right? No, well, in all actuality, that's a warning sign and symptom of mental health difficulties if you're not recognizing that you also need to take care of yourself too. Us always giving to others, that in fact is a warning sign and symptom of potentially mental health issues.
So it makes me think about what we were just talking about. So basically, Black women and girls, the girls, we have the adulting challenge, and then the Black women, we have the angry challenge that people kind of, place upon us. Wow. Oh, yeah, this is good. So speaking of this is good, in the Black community, everyone is asking the question, you good? Yeah, are you good? With the over 200% increase in suicides you just mentioned, we're not so good. How should someone actually answer that question, in your opinion? Or what is a better way to answer the question?
Yeah. I think first, it's when someone does ask that question, like, good, I think we have to ask it in such a way that we're creating space for someone to be honest and authentic with their answer. Because too often we're asking it as a pleasantry, and we don't really want someone to tell us, I'm not good. We want them to say, oh, I'm good. That's what we're looking for. If we lead with that mindset, we're not creating space for anyone to be authentic and open with us about things that they may be experiencing.
When you just said that, it made me think of it's almost rhythmic, if that makes sense. You good? I'm good. It's like it's a rhythm instead of the reality.
And we teach, it's so funny. I have a 2-year-old son, and one of his top phrases is, I'm good. He says, I'm good. He walks around and says, I'm good. Because like you said, it's rhythmic. It's a way of us checking in, but like almost not fully checking in. So the first thing that I encourage is when you ask someone how they're doing, good, like really have some inflection, have a mindset where you are open to them being authentic with you that they may not be doing well. For someone to respond, I encourage, especially among Black women these days, that you say, hey, I actually have some things going on that's impacting my mental health and well-being. I'm happy to share, but if you don't have the time and space, maybe we can talk about it another time. The reason I add that last caveat is because we are all going through things right now. And we want to make sure that I may ask you if you're good and you're struggling and you respond to me, but I'm also struggling, then I'm not going to actually be able to be very helpful. So adding that tidbit, like I've actually had some things going on with my mental health. Thank you for asking. I'm happy to open up. I'm happy to share more if you have the time and space, because I can't tell you how many times I've been on the phone with a girlfriend where I'm telling them during this COVID period that I have a family member passing away, and they're telling me that they have a family member passing away. We've got to make sure that we're checking in with each other, but that we're also creating time and space to have those open and authentic conversations. And then when someone does open up to you about the things that they're experiencing, they may say, oh, well, I'm just so depressed and, I lost my job and I don't know what I'm going to do. At times we feel very anxious and we don't know how to respond. My top phrase that I tell people is say, thank you so much for sharing that. It's really brave. If you add that, that's validating for the person that you hear them, that they did the right thing in opening up, because it is brave to open up. That's not the norm. That's not good to open up. But it also creates a space where you're also saying, like, I'm validating what you're saying to me, but I'm not trying to fix it. Too often in our community, we always want to fix things, and we feel like we have to come up with a perfect response, and we have to come up with a solution. Just to say, thank you so much for sharing that. That was really brave. And then maybe checking in on the person. Check-ins are the best thing that we can do for others right now. It's very difficult to see people in person, to always know what everyone's comfort is right now with various health restrictions. But checking in, following up, those things are key. But we have to start having more authentic conversations, even in these, small rhythmic ways of, actually I've been struggling a little bit, but, we can talk, if you got time, we can talk about it right now. If not, maybe we can get together for lunch later on this week, something like that.
Sure. That's a great share. Thank you. And hopefully that'll help.
Hopefully.
So whether someone is wealthy or not, suicide has become a real issue. From successful actresses such as Brandy suffering from depression and having suicide ideation, to Halle Berry attempting suicide after a failed marriage, and even American Idol star Fantasia having a suicide attempt because she was dealing with trust issues and loneliness. What is causing young girls to attempt to take their lives?
The biggest thing is feeling hopeless. Feeling hopeless, and in many instances, feeling like you haven't gotten help for quite some time. In about 98% of instances where someone attempts to take their own life or complete suicide, there were warning signs and symptoms. There are some instances where there are not warning signs and symptoms, but in most cases, there are warning signs and symptoms. But we find too often that we don't recognize the warning signs and symptoms. Specifically within our community, we can't fathom religiously, spiritually, that someone would contemplate taking their own life or hurting themselves. So we don't take threats serious.
Let me jump in. In our community, we think suicide is for white people.
Yep, essentially.
Yeah. Black people don't commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
A myth.
Yep, exactly. And we also think at times that it's predicated on your relationship to the spiritual side, to the religious side. So we feel like, well, you just need to get tight with God. Like that's what you need to do to be good. So when we don't take warning signs and symptoms serious, when we don't know what to look for, people are struggling right in front of us, and we don't know what it looks like, and we don't know what to do. This is an issue, like you said, that impacts everyone, and specifically impacts Black women and girls across the spectrum. This isn't just a poverty issue. This is an issue that impacts us across the spectrum. And it's because as Black women and girls, we are thought to be strong and resilient. People don't see us as what our community sometimes classifies as someone who is experiencing suicidal ideation as weak. So we can't even fathom that a strong, resilient woman could be struggling with her mental health. When we place these unrealistic expectations on ourselves, but also on others and on our community, we don't create that space. We don't create that space to struggle. Struggle is not celebrating in our community. We celebrate strong, resilient Black women and girls. That's what we celebrate. And while that should be celebrated, we also should be celebrating those who are authentic, those that are open, those that fall down and get back up. Like those are the things that also show resilience and show strength, and things that we have to start to celebrate and start to uplift more within our sisters, within our mothers, within our, peers, whoever it is. We've got to start to create more space for people to be human, to truly be human.
It's funny that you say that. I have literally gotten away from the word strong. I don't really like to compliment people being strong. My word is courage. And so when you just mentioned celebrating, I like to celebrate somebody having some courage more than strength.
Yep. Because it takes a lot of courage to be open and authentic. Like the women that you described, the Halle Berry, the Fantasia, Serena Williams, the list goes on. Their courage and power comes from them being open and honest about the things that they experience and creating more space for others. Like I recently wrote a post for Black Girl Smile on Simone Biles, and she's had all these things named after her, and now saying, nope, my mental health, I'm not in a good place. I'm not going to be able to perform at my best. That should also be called the Simone Biles, because now she has created space for others to prioritize themselves, to make sure that they are at their best to succeed. We too often, I can't tell you, we've probably all at some point shown up for a job, shown up feeling horrible mentally, and then no one's going to get our best. If we continue to go down this path of feeling like we have to live up to this resilient and this strong image, our mental health is going to continue to struggle. We've got to start to celebrate courage, to start to celebrate bravery, because opening up, focusing on your mental health and well-being, that is courageous and that is extremely brave. And
Yes.
Shoot, at this point, Simone Biles probably is going to save lives. I don't know that her flips were going to save lives, but space that she has now created for others to prioritize their mental health and well-being, that is literally going to save lives.
Yes. Yeah. How powerful. I'm just proud of her. You had your own personal experience with suicide attempts. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with clinical depression when I was 15. And I was fortunate enough, I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. So I was able to quickly get plugged in with a Black woman provider. So I was very fortunate in that sense. But I didn't really have a mental health care plan set in place when I was going off to college. And went off to college and wasn't focusing on my mental health and well-being, and had some serious experiences happening that I didn't feel comfortable opening up to others about. I went to the University of Virginia, very rigorous academics, but I was struggling academically, and I didn't feel like I could tell people that I was struggling. Um, Again, we're supposed to succeed. We're supposed to be strong, brave, succeed, be resilient. You know, what Black woman do you know who's out here asking for help? Like that was how I felt. Um, and all of that essentially culminated into me attempting to take my life for the first time at age 19. After that, I got out of the hospital and I kind of went back to things as usual. And because I wasn't prioritizing making some changes and really focusing on my mental health and well-being, the same thing happened a year later. And as crazy as it sounds, after that second suicide attempt, I'm sitting in a psychiatric hospital and I'm thinking to myself, like, I want to live. And I don't want this to happen year after year after year.
Yeah.
This takes such a toll on you mentally, physically, spiritually. It's a big thing to attempt to take your own life. So for me to live and to live a full life, I knew I was going to have to prioritize my mental health and well-being minute by minute, second by second. And that's truly what I have set out to do ever since. Nothing comes above my mental health and well-being. Like even being a mother, being a partner, being a business owner, being a nonprofit leader, all of that comes secondary to me ensuring that I'm mentally healthy as well, because I can't serve anyone well. I can't take care of my son. I can't be a good partner, can't be a good business owner, business leader if I'm not mentally healthy and well. And when that changed, a lot of things opened up for me.
Good for you. There was so much more work for you to do. Even this interview right now. Yes. So if we can just kind of unpack a thing or two, when you first started struggling, how did you let your parents know, or did you?
I started to act out. And we had a history of mental health issues in my family, but it wasn't really something that was discussed. I knew about other, things that ran in our family, but
Diagnoses.
yeah, this wasn't something that was discussed. So when I was starting to act out, I wasn't my usual self. I was very agitated. My academics were struggling. I was having trouble sleeping. I was having trouble eating. And it was showing up as being just being very defiant. And I understand where a lot of people are like, well, isn't that typical adolescent behavior? Yes and no. It can be typical for an adolescent to act out. But if you have an adolescent who is normally, gets along pretty well with their parents, gets along pretty well with their siblings, does well academically, does well, in extracurriculars, and then they're starting to struggle, you've got to really look at that demeanor shift, that persona shift. Those are the things to look at for someone who's potentially struggling with mental health issues. I also advocate that anyone can see a therapist. Like even if you go to a therapist and they're like, you don't have a mental health issue. As Black people, there is always something for us to unpack.
Yes.
But those demeanor shifts, the shift in my relationship, the shift in the way that I was taking care of myself, those are the things that my parents started to pick up on. And started to have me evaluated at 15.
Good that they were aware. And after the second attempt, how did they support you? What changed? And what did you do as you prioritize your mental health moving forward?
Yeah, I love my family. I love my parents. I don't want to say that they did way too much different. It's a very scary experience for any parent to go through. I can't even imagine going through that with my child. For me, the biggest shift was internal. It was me realizing that I had to take responsibility for my mental health and well-being. We are on this planet with a lot of other people. There's not a lot of things that we can control at times. Yes, but you do control your mental health and your well-being. There are things that can come in and try to impact that, but you control how you respond and how you take care of yourself in the midst of those experiences. And when I started to have that shift, when I started to take ownership over my mental health and well-being, that's when things truly started to change for me. And that looks like individual therapy. It looks like working with a psychiatrist, and it also looks like going to group therapy. I was in all the therapies. Good. But sometimes, that's what's needed. And too often people feel like if you have to do something like that, well, I must be sick and this is how my life's going to be forever. No, that's not the case. Just like with any other ailment, illness, things like that, if you change lifestyle, that can totally alter the illness and how it manifests itself in your life. There are people with diabetes who have taken diabetes medication and then don't have to take it anymore because they're able to change things in their lifestyle. The same is true with mental health. When I was able to change things in my lifestyle, change things internally, that really shifted things for my mental health and well-being, but also for my illness.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's impactful. So, you kind of explained some of the signs parents should pay attention to. Is there anything else that you want to add to that?
I would say, additionally, looking out for signs of cyberbullying. This is one of the biggest issues that we're hearing these days among youth and adolescents is a lot of cyberbullying. And this is very difficult for parents to pick up on because this is probably one of the only areas where youth are more versed in something than we are.
Right.
And this also, to give people context, this isn't how things always are. This is a very unique situation that young people are more versed in something that is huge in society and a huge part of lifestyle that adults and parents don't know about. So, picking up on warning signs and symptoms of potential bullying is going to be key. If someone is seeming like they're eating too much, not eating enough, sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, if they are not interacting with peers, if they're not engaging in extracurriculars that they previously did, if they just are seeming very much like out of it. And that doesn't mean, sound the alarm, bring in the brigade, it means that we need to potentially ask some more questions to try to create space where we're asking, do you mind sharing things that you've been experiencing, how you're feeling about things? And also, this is very hard for parents to hear, but you may not be the person to ask these questions. Recognizing who your young person feels comfortable opening up to, whether that's an aunt, uncle, godparent, it may not be you. And I know that's very difficult for a lot of parents to hear, but tapping into those resources that your young person feels comfortable opening up to, learning more about some of the things that they're experiencing, asking questions about friends. Those are going to be key with picking up on signs of potential cyberbullying. Last thing I will also add is changes in hygiene. teaching them hygiene are things that happen during adolescence, but starting to pick up on if you're finding that your child is having a lot of difficulty getting out of bed, they don't really seem like they're taking care of themselves, they're not really caring about their appearance. Those are potential warning signs and symptoms as well of someone who all of their effort is going into showing up, that they have nothing left to care about taking care of themselves. And that is a huge warning sign or symptom. I also encourage people, probably the biggest certification kind of in this space right now is called Youth Mental Health First Aid. Black Girl Smile actually offers that training program to parents and to caregivers. So if you want to learn more about what those warning signs and symptoms are, what it looks like to have these conversations, to access resources, things like that, I think it's really important to go through some sort of training program as well.
Excellent. Excellent. And my next question was, what recommendations would you have? So how about that? But for this particular question, what recommendations can you share with a Black girl or woman that's experiencing severe depression, anxiety, or maybe contemplating suicide? So when I say recommendations, how can they take hold of their mental health? Ellen?
Yeah, I mean, first is realizing that you have an issue, and that if you haven't been experiencing symptoms for quite some time, and when I say quite some time, DSM, that's kind of like the psychology Bible or like therapist Bible, and I would agree with, if you feel like you're experiencing symptoms for more than like 2 weeks, maybe a little longer right now, it's very easy to feel bad. Extended period of time. But if you find that you're experiencing warning signs and symptoms for more than 2 weeks, it's probably not something you're just going to come out of. You need to access resources. This isn't something you can sleep away. This isn't something you can pray away. This isn't like just going to go away with time. If you're experiencing warning signs and symptoms, if you are having suicidal ideation, things like that, it's not going to just go away. You need to access resources. So I would highly encourage people to reach out to their primary care physician. They can make referrals. At times they will treat. Reaching out to the crisis text line. So that's a good crisis resource, especially for adolescents. They are available 24/7, 365. If you text SMILE, we actually have a keyword with them, to 741-741. You receive a crisis text counselor who can help walk someone through kind of getting off that ledge and helping them access some resources. I do encourage people to call 911. That can be touchy, but that's what they're there for. That's our best option right now. If you find that you or someone you know is experiencing a crisis where they're potentially going to hurt themselves or others immediately, you need to reach out to 911. You can indicate that it is a mental health issue, the person's nonviolent, or if they don't have a weapon. You can even ask if they'll send someone out who's gone through some sort of mental health training. Can't guarantee that, but you're doing your due diligence. And then I always encourage people to have an idea of some of the resources within your community, especially if you're in some of these larger municipalities. They'll have various lines, lifelines, resource teams that they can send out in lieu of sending out the police. Lastly, I would highly encourage people to try to access therapeutic resources. So Black Girl Smile has a therapy assistance program. So if someone needs financial assistance working with a therapist, they can apply on our website. There's several other organizations that offer things such as that as well, like the Loveland Foundation or the Forrest Henson Lawrence Foundation, started by Taraji B. Henson. They offer therapy scholarship programs. There's an organization out of Chicago called Sister Afia. They offer therapy scholarship programs. But reach out and try to access these resources. Reach out to organizations like Black Girl Smile, other organizations that are in the space, Black mental health nonprofits. We do our best to try to help people. Like, that's what we're founded for. So even if we're not the ones to help you, we'll try to connect you with other resources. We'll try to connect you with the right resources that you need. But it's really important to access resources. If if symptoms are lasting for a period of time, it's not something that's just going to go away.
That is wonderful. And I'm so glad that we have all of that recorded. What would you say to them? Something really simple. If they're really in a bad state, something they can do at that moment.
That's a good question. My keyword over the last 2 years now has been grace. Showing yourself some grace. It's not unusual to have a bad day. It's not unusual to have a bad week, bad month, at this point, bad year. That's what it means to be human. And to hang on, to continue to show yourself grace, to show up for yourself, that's the most brave and courageous thing that you can do. It may not always feel that way, but to show yourself grace is the biggest thing that you can do.
That is wonderful and a wonderful word. How can people find out more about you and Black Girls Smile?
Yeah, so our website's blackgirlsmile.org. We're also on social media. We'll be starting a podcast very soon. Just finding us on the internet, social media, reaching out to us. We try to stay as visible as possible. But if anyone wants to follow up with me directly, just reach out to the organization on our website. I monitor that pretty closely. So you can always reach me pretty easily there as well. We're always looking for new ways to be responsive, to continue to connect with the community, to provide resources, to listen to the community. We try not to be one of those organizations where we got all the answers and we know exactly how we're going to do things. Mental health is something that's very personal, but it's also something that we've got to start to tackle as a community. And that's really what we try to do with Black Girls Smile. So we're always looking for input, feedback, reaching out to us and letting us know what people need so we can do our best to try to help.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for the work you're doing and helping Black girls smile and get some Black joy back.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.